I've got with me today Andy Coates. You describe yourself as what? Instrument engineer and designer? Design engineer rolled up in one?
Yeah, I do product owner responsibilities.
I'm not sure that's language that everyone always hears too. What would you say is in your organization's product owner?
So in 2020, Chevron adopted in a reorg, we adopted the Agile model.
Okay.
Usually Agile model is more for software development, things like that. And so out of that, we had to come up with product owners for various, products. And in my case, I represent manufacturing, which is all of our wholly owned refineries.
Okay. Because when you say software, like being the product owner for the development of a software or a feature set is one thing,
Yes.
But you guys have extended that to kind of normal business operations.
Yeah, so we meet every day, our daily stand-ups, and I basically represent manufacturing in the platform and a lot of the initiatives that manufacturing likes to see done around, AI development projects, things like that.
But also from a day-to-day, not so much in running the plant, right? In your past, you've been based at a refinery, right?
Yeah, actually, Salt Lake. So I am still based in Salt Lake, but I represent all 5 refineries in not just the product owner role, but other like training and things like that too. So,
but your core fundamental basis was around instrumentation.
Yes,
is that correct?
Instrumentation design, instrument analyzer design.
How did you get started in that?
Oh, geez. Back in 1996, I started working for the Department of Defense, the U.S. Army, in the Chem DMIL program. So Chem DMIL was chemical demilitarization. So around the United States, there were stockpiles of chemical weapons.
Okay.
And under treaties that the U.S. signed with other countries, we had to destroy those chemical weapons within a certain amount of time. And so I worked at the pilot plant in Utah that demonstrated the technology to destroy chemical weapons, basically incinerate chemical weapons. And so I worked in a laboratory, did laboratory work, methods development for sampling hazardous waste, and then air monitoring to monitor the the incinerator, and did a lot of emissions work, continuous emissions monitoring, all of that stuff. So fast forward 10 years, decided I was getting tired of that, and I wanted to go back to school. And so I went to school, or I started going to school, and my plan was to work for Chevron to pay off some bills.
Okay.
And go to law school.
Okay.
And so I had about 11 years of experience in laboratory and analyzers, all of that stuff. And then decided, like I said, I wanted to go to law school, and took the MCATs, did all of that stuff, and realized that law was not my cup of tea anymore.
Okay.
It's very ugly. And I was actually working with a friend. He was a prosecuting attorney. Anyway, long story short, got out of that, stayed with Chevron, and have just kind of progressed, started, in process controls based off that experience, and now I'm.
But the first 10 years were with the Army.
Working with the military.
Okay.
On a bunch of different projects.
Okay, because instrumentation is one thing that there's not. We talked about this on one of our recent podcasts. There's not exactly a clear path to that.
There is not.
In fact, my daughter's graduating with an electrical engineering degree, and she just recently interviewed, and she got there, and she was interviewing for instrumentation, and she was like, I don't even really think that's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, she wasn't fully aware of what that meant, and she wasn't exactly trained for that. So there's not a degree in a lot of cases for that. You know what I mean?
The only thing I've ever really seen is at some of the vocational schools, they'll have maybe a tract for instrumentation as part of maybe electrical or electricians, things like that.
Yeah, we see it more from a tech perspective.
Yep, exactly.
In the Texas education scene, there's the ability to go to a tech school and become a designer. So you become an instrument designer.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
here at the local EPCs, typically there's a delineation between a designer who creates a specification for the instrument and chooses it, and then a designer who figures out how to mount it, wire it, power it, all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And that's the breakdown. But then, like in your organization there at Chevron, you use the term design engineer,
Yes.
which to me I think implies technically you're able to cover both. But I've seen it a little differently in my career.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of our design engineers, I and C is what where I, C, and E, design engineers, what we call. We typically see a lot of electrical, engineers backgrounds. Some once in a while you'll see a process engineer, but not very often.
Yeah.
We'll see people from process controls, but yeah, typically it's just experience that puts you in that world of INC design.
Okay, yeah, because you've got electrical, then you've got instrumentation, and then there's also an automation discipline. And so sometimes people lump all those together, or they'll lump a couple of them, INC or I&E, but I mean, technically those are separate, and the two that have the least defined path to them is the automation and instrumentation.
Yeah.
Right, a pure electrical, you can go get a pure electrical engineering degree, become an electrical engineer, size motors and cables and install lighting and do a traditional electrical engineering stuff.
Yes.
But
yes.
typically it's either chemical, mechanical, or electrical can fall into instrument, automation, and controls, and there it's a little bit more loosely defined as to where you're going to go.
Yeah, and there's even another subset of INC, which is analyzers.
Okay. I was going to bring that up
yeah.
because one of the things that we always say when we're scoping out a job or we're evaluating something is you never start with the analyzers because they're always weird.
Yep.
And so when somebody but then in a database of instrumentation, they're the A. So sometimes we'll get on a call and somebody will dive right into they want to show an example and they'll pop open an analyzer. And I say, nope, stop, go down to a flow transmitter, a normal piece of instrumentation.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that one. And then we'll work our way back up to the complexity of analyzers.
Well, and that's really, like I said, what got me into the refining industry is I had a lot of experience in analyzers, not just within a lab, like a GC, or we used a lot of FTNIRs and inductively coupled plasma, all of that stuff. So that was experience that I was able to take to refining and say, hey, we have GCs on one of our streams to our GRU. And so that's where a lot of that came in. But that's a very specialized area as well that Chevron really struggles with. And I think a lot of other companies struggle with that same thing, getting analyzer experience.
Well, and I don't have a ton of experience with those. I mean, in the energy business, what you want is generally 4 to 20 transmitters.
Yeah. Something
that easily wires into the control system, that all the commissioning guys know how to install it and make it work. But analyzers often, I mean, they're basically a little flow computer, or a little computer, essentially, right? And so communications is often different, right? Obviously, like the amount of feed they take, it's not just measuring one thing, it's measuring a group of signals.
Oh, yeah,
right?
You could have 12 streams, sometimes 12 streams on a GC, or but analyzers are becoming a lot more important now as we start optimizing processes and trying to get more out of say our FCCs or our GRUs. And I use the example of the FCC and GRUs because that's when I was in process controls, that was my plant. I had the FCC and I had our GRUs and our jet treater in Salt Lake. And so you have analyzers that are looking at your streams and your GRUs, and your operators are running the plant off of those numbers. And then, you've got blending. We use a lot of analyzers on our blends because we don't want to be giving octanes away. And so when we're blending in, whether it's summer or winter, we're running online analyzers to look at those blends so that we get the right blend before we send it out.
Yeah, because there's a little bit of magic involved in what those analyzers are doing.
Yeah,
I mean,
Ramon.
like my background is primarily in more like safety, and in that scenario, it's generally high pressure, high temperature. I'm looking for leaks. I'm looking for potential hazards.
Right.
And the only detectors that are involved were just your gas detectors, right, around the facility, and they're fairly simplistic compared to some of these process stream analyzers, because what you're talking about is not really you've got safety, you've got normal process control, and then like the analyzers are a bit for fine-tuning the process, right?
Optimization. So we another one we use analyzers on a lot is our furnaces. So we have furnace O2s and COs and other detectors to help us run our furnaces more efficient, which actually is kind of funny because some of the furnaces, if you've ever seen in a refinery, are not the most, I guess, safe, or not, I shouldn't say safe. They're definitely safe, they're just not airtight. So some of those furnaces are older, and so they leak, and so we've spent a lot of time when we optimize a furnace. We're not just looking at combustibles and things like that. We're looking at how we can, I guess, get that furnace to run, a little bit cleaner.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So analyzer, instrument background, chemical cleanup, and not destruction. What'd you call it?
Chemical demilitarization.
Demilitarization.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Demilitarizing.
Now, what do you see moving forward? Like, what have the changes been since you kind of jumped into this type of role to where we are now in 2026?
Wow. So I just celebrated 20 years with Chevron, and we've come a long way. I guess for me, being in manufacturing at a refinery level, I see a lot of energy going into two areas. Obviously, optimization, running our plants at a higher rate, using less energy, because in a refinery, one of your main cost to operate is energy. Whether it's developing steam or electricity, things like that, that costs you a lot of money to run. To run a refinery. So we spent a lot of money in optimization, and then our turnaround cost. Being able to, when we take a unit down, know that it's going to take us 30 days to get all of that maintenance done, so we can hit our P50 target or our P90 target to come back up in that window of time.
Yeah.
So those two things encompass a lot within them, but those are the two main focus areas I see.
Well, Blake likes to talk a lot about AI and how it's impacting the workforce, and I guess as you look forward, to the future of your career, like what are you seeing?
Well, and that's the thing is AI. It has a lot to do with both of those, right? I mean, my particular role right now, and one of the things that we work with you on ProLytX is our data foundation project. And so in the data foundation project, we are taking all of our systems of record that we've used in the past and putting them all into the smart instrumentation database. And so you can take that and show where that helps us our maintenance turnarounds be more efficient, because we're able to take the data that we already have, and if we have a gap, then we can fill that in a lot easier, and we can plan better off of that, and we can be more predictable.
Yeah, I think even in this age when AI can read information better, can process images, can process PDFs, scans, there's some inefficiency if you're going to stick with those older sources. And so what I'm an advocate for is, if you have a system of record that you do feel works well with your business, then transforming that data, even you can use AI, that's fine, using something to transform it into that system, and then applying that AI technology to other data sets that maybe don't have as clear-cut a source, right? Because I think there's like this risk of saying, well, because AI can process these images so well, I'll stop investing in these centralized systems and I'll just depend upon that interpretation.
Actually, that's funny that you bring that up, because one of the things that I battle constantly, and I guess you shouldn't say constantly, but it kind of ebbs and flows, is we go down a path of, this is the system of record we're going to use. And we do that for a couple of years, and then something changes, maybe a leadership position changes, or something happens, and then we start second guessing, why are we doing this? And it's usually our systems of record. Well, surely we could do something more efficient if we did it this way. And one of them is, we typically go back and say, well, why can't we just make a folder on some O drive somewhere, or some hosted drive, and that be our system of record? Well, inevitably, as you know, that you lose control of that very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so, as a refinery, we go through PSM, or process safety management audits, where we bring in people from our other facilities. They come in and they look at our PSM processes. And usually the last few years, we've been able to pass those audits without any problems, because we have maintained those systems of record. Where we start getting into trouble is when we don't maintain those system of records, and somebody gets an idea and say, we're going to just put this information in this file location. Mm-hmm. And then we can't reproduce it, and we can't say that we have the latest revision, and those audits, we start to fail those audits.
Okay. Yeah, because I've been to a lot of conferences lately talking about the idea of interoperability, the idea of how AI can do the digitalization, and again, like it's sort of a battle between the 10 years ago that there really wasn't a discussion about that. It was all about, hey, I need the big tools in place, and I've got to funnel everything to the big tools. Yeah. And now I've seen a conversation about, well, maybe I'll just stitch it all together, and I won't do as much of the big tool planning, and I don't necessarily want to create a scenario where we're all burdened by huge software packages, but I certainly don't think we're in a scenario where we just say, oh, that's not needed anymore, and we'll just use raw scattered data because our tools are just so smart to read it.
Yeah, no, and I think I know it seems maybe to a lot of people it might seem counterintuitive, but I think sometimes the more organized you get, the less efficient you get. And so it's really looking at how are you organizing your data. And so I know there's a lot of talk, about digital twins and things like that throughout the industry, and Chevron isn't any different. We're working to implement a digital twin. And there are things that I think we need to change the way we do. The way we implement the digital twin, but I think from a high level, we're taking it and saying, what are we going to do with this data, and how is it going to be sustainable? Because nobody wants to spend time and money on something that isn't sustainable.
Refreshability or
exactly.
Life cycle management
Life
of
cycle
something
management,
is
right.
really the key, because it's one thing to package information and put it in a great, beautiful format and holder, right? It's neat to have a tool that connects multiple disciplines to
Yeah.
bring all this together. I talk a lot about what is a digital twin, and generally we use the phrase like an informational digital twin as a starting point. Just first, can I gather and find everything, kind of like Google Maps? And getting it in there is really an exciting exercise, but the underlying workflows to keep it up to date
Yeah.
is so critical.
Well, that and then the other piece of it is who's going to be using the data. So in a refinery, especially, there's no shortage of data. Like we can generate, terabytes of data. That's not the problem. It's organizing it into and into forms that the user can then utilize it without any problems. So like process engineer, they look at certain things and they need to see a certain data set to do their job. Well, that's not necessarily what an INC engineer would need. They need process data, but they only need a snapshot of that process data. They don't need to see, any more than that. So it's taking all the data that you have and presenting it in a way that's usable, because if an INC or even a technician, use that example, if a technician needs to go out and look at some wiring, well, does he need to, he's got to shuffle through a whole bunch of files to find something. That's not usable information. That's just a waste of time. So it won't be used. And so it's getting the data in a way and putting it in a way that people can use it easily.
Okay. Well, hey, let's pivot a little bit. You mentioned school.
Yes.
What was your school history?
So at the University of Utah, and I actually went to also to the University of Phoenix because I was finishing part of my degree. I was a single dad, so I had 3 kids, and so I was working and going to school, and so I needed to go. I wanted to get my degree, and so I went to University of Phoenix to do some of that, and then the University of Utah. For some of it.
Now, you had an athletic history too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to share anything you don't want, but I mean, you played football?
So I went to high school, played football, played arena football for a little while, a few years. And then after 3 knee surgeries and 4 knee surgeries and a couple of concussions, and I just realized that was not part of my life anymore. And being a dad and with kids, that was it.
You did the rodeo before or after or during?
Did a little bit of that during.
Okay, so that was simultaneous
yes,
football and rodeo
yes,
at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've always. I know this is a little bit of my ADHD coming through.
Okay.
But there are things I've always wanted to try. Yeah. And I enjoyed sports a lot. I enjoyed playing football, and I enjoyed rodeo and a few of those. So it was always something I wanted to try and learn that.
Okay, this arena football situation.
Yes.
Is that like, did y'all travel as a team?
Yeah, we would play in Las Vegas. We would go to games in Las Vegas. Sometimes we had games in Utah. It was mostly Utah, Las Vegas. We didn't do much more than that.
Okay. So this is it? How did you travel to Vegas as an arena football team?
They had a bus, but most of us didn't ride the bus.
Okay.
We drove separately. We had a hotel that we stayed in, and then we'd take the bus to the arena, and we would play. It was either usually a 2:00 game or a 6:00 game, and depending on what game you played, that kind of decided how much you played the night before out on the strip or wherever. So to say we were serious, I didn't take it real serious. I was I enjoyed it. Some of the guys were trying to use it as a way to get in to something more professional
Well, I
than
think
that.
Kurt Warner played in the Arena League, right?
Yes. So Utah had a couple of arena teams at the time. The Warriors. They played for the Warriors, and then then it evolved into the Arena Football League, which I think a lot more people understand or are more familiar with that now. The AFL. I don't think it's around anymore, but that's what Kurt Warner played in, was the AFL.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Everybody's trying to build. I mean, the NFL is basically the biggest sporting revenue generator. I guess maybe there's a soccer league that maybe generates a lot, but NFL generates so much, and everyone's trying to recreate that, and it's hard to do because, like, as a fan base, we have enough energy to support college football and the NFL, but it's hard to support a whole lot more than that. Maybe it's changed a little bit over time.
Right, and to me, the one exciting thing about arena football is, the field was 60 yards long and I think it was 30 yards wide, if I remember right. But it was really fast paced.
Yeah.
And the games were exciting.
And the play,
we
could you approach the line of scrimmage before that, like as a receiver? Were they allowed to run
I forget
in
all
motion
of the
toward
rules.
the line of
I
scrimmage?
always played defense, so I played linebacker or defensive end. So, but yeah, you had the whole field. You were basically out of bounds when you hit the boundary. Like, that's the sidelines, the pads on the sideline. So, yeah, it was. If you've ever played football, picture playing football on a scouring pad. That's pretty much what arena football was.
The early AstroTurf was not so good.
Yes, it was literally like one of those green Brillo pads that your grandma used to have. Like I still have scars on my elbows and knees and stuff from, your skin got tore off.
Oh man! Now that was a paying gig.
A little bit,
okay.
Not much.
Okay, so you're
it was more me living out my dreams of something more.
Okay, so we did a podcast a while back about sports and how it has an impact on our work and our careers in the way that we learn how to work as a team and listen to a coach and deal with adversity, and then also it has a social aspect because it's sort of a harmless thing that you can use as an icebreaker and you can use as a bond to talk to people. So has that been your experience too, some of those similar scenarios?
Absolutely. I think I guess from a physical standpoint, I don't regret playing sports, but I definitely pay the price now. Mm-hmm. But I think, from as far as a career standpoint and the way I look at, life now as in a career and even with family and stuff, playing sports taught me a lot. Mm-hmm. Like you said, a lot of discipline, a lot of realizing that if you want something, you have to work hard for it, giving it 100%. I know that sounds a little corny, but I believe that thoroughly. That if you don't, and I'm not saying you have to play a sport to learn all of that. I just feel like that helps you understand it a lot better.
It's a pretty good package to teach those lessons.
Yes,
I think.
Discipline. My kids are all pretty much grown. He'll be 18 in May. And he played sports a little bit when he was younger, but he's always been a little bit more into the photography and things like that. And raising him compared to my other children who played sports were very into sports. It's interesting to see a little bit of the differences between them and my youngest son as he graduates high school and the way he looks at things. It's definitely a difference.
I think I described it in our original podcast that, like, kind of the fact that sometimes you just get yelled at. You get redirected. Let me put it that way. And then somebody asked me afterward, they're like, "Are you yelling at your employees?" And I'm like, "No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that experience toughens you up. And it teaches you that, okay, yeah, things aren't going to go my way, But the cool thing about sports is that there's a reset button, and you
Yeah.
just restart the game
Yeah.
the next week or the next day or whatever. And so even though you had trouble, you regroup and you restart, which is harder in life, right? Sometimes you fall down and it takes longer to climb up out of it. But it's like this little program, it's like this little way to teach you that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know, me growing up in the generation I did, and the I guess the environment that I grew up in before sports, our family was more agricultural based, I guess. We farming and ranching, things like that, and so we grew up like that. One of the things I always joke and I tell my kids is I didn't get to cry. Like if I cried, I didn't get to go do something, right? If we were out doing something and you started crying, that meant you had to, go back. So we didn't cry. And I know that may not the healthiest way of looking at things nowadays. But anyway, but that kind of prepared me. That I kind of gravitated towards sports because of that discipline and because of that, that idea of structure and again, like I said, I have a little bit of ADHD, so structure helps me. It's I think. Where was I going with that?
Well,
I'm
emotion
sorry.
is not bad.
Yeah.
But toughness is good, and to balance the two of them out, like you mentioned. So where with your family in that agricultural setting, you don't show that some of that emotion.
Yeah.
When I was at school at A&M, I was in the Corps Cadets, and as a freshman, they tell you you're not allowed to show emotion.
Right.
You can't feel. You can't like something. And you really couldn't even use that word. Like if you said that, you were in trouble, right? You were supposed. They were like dehumanizing you a little bit, but they were trying to say, look, you're going to have a job, and you need to just focus on that job. And so I always kind of chuckle about that. Fish are not allowed to feel.
Yeah.
So
well, and even one of the things that always attracts not just sports, but and one of the things that I do like about working in a group that I work in now is that you mentioned it earlier, is working on a team and working together. And there's a level of, I guess, camaraderie that you can't get unless you play a sport. Really. I mean, I guess maybe you could get if you were, 'cause I can consider cheering and things like that as a sport as well, but if you've never done anything like that, it's hard to understand that group dynamic, I guess.
I think that's huge. I mean, I'm a fan of some of the individual sports, maybe swimming or golf. There are sports that are from an individual basis, but when you talk about the development, and those are good because they do teach you hard work, and you got to show up early for practice, and you got to be mentally tough and all that. But there's a special dynamic around being on the field together. Your success is a team success. Your failure is a team failure.
Yes.
And your communication, that's one of the things that I think is really important, is you're learning how to communicate and knowing that a direct communication is not an attack, right? Like if you're on that field and somebody yells at you, like, he's coming your way.
Yeah.
No matter how they say it, you're appreciative of the message.
Yeah,
Whether it comes
exactly.
across nicely or whether, like you want that message. And so just being, focusing on the communication aspect, I think is just a huge part of it.
Well, yeah, when you say that, I mean, the first thing that comes to my head is feedback. And so, as you graduate or, graduate college.
What can I do better, coach?
And then you start in a real career. Most companies, I've worked for companies that didn't do this, but having feedback is such an important piece of being successful.
Yeah.
And giving employees feedback and receiving feedback. And, that's one of the big, that I've seen within Chevron that, as we've, I guess, evolved, is, feedback is a lot bigger part of our careers now, both giving feedback and receiving feedback. And that helps me incredibly because I'm used to being in the details, right? I'm used to working in the details. And sometimes I don't always look up and see some of the things that are, maybe happening around me that I didn't catch or even, communicate to somebody else. And so, feedback, both positive feedback and constructive feedback is important.
But being able to receive it is part of that,
Exactly.
correct? It's not just having somebody willing to give it, because it's fairly easy to find someone willing to give some sort of
absolutely.
critique. But being able to take it in and use that to be better rather than take it in and internalize it or be upset about it or be, you know what I'm saying?
Well, and that's why I said constructive feedback, because most of the time you would just say negative feedback. There's positive feedback and negative feedback. But constructive feedback, I think, helps take away some of maybe that anxiety of hey, I'm getting some feedback. I need to be more receptive to it.
Yeah.
I know if it's constructive, it's not going to be as hard to.
Well, yeah, as a coach, if you just tell a kid, hey, that was terrible, but you don't tell them how to improve it or why it needs to be better or whatever, you just degrade them, that's not actually feedback, right?
Not at all.
And there are scenarios like that where the coaching isn't that great. But like a good coach, I've got a kid who's a pole vaulter, and that's such a weird activity in that just 99% of the population has no idea how that
Right,
works.
right.
We watch it in awe and appreciate it, and you can throw me in that 99%. I just don't know. But he's got a coach that he really trusts, and he will jump, and then we'll record the video, and he'll say, all right, what did I do right? What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Right? And being able to take that and say, okay, I've got to do that better. Like seeing the hunger for that feedback and the willingness to accept it is really, I think, setting him up for a good scenario in the future.
Yeah. So when you start talking about that type of feedback, I remember, playing arena football, and one of our coaches was not the best at feedback. And so I remember one practice in the morning, I hadn't had anything to eat, and we're about halfway through practice, and I'm getting kind of sick to my stomach, and I did something wrong apparently, and he came over and got right in my face, and he liked to chew, and he chewed Copenhagen Fine Cut.
Okay.
And it has a distinctive odor, and I still to this day remember that odor. And I remember him getting in my face and screaming at me, and I remember feeling the little grains of chew hitting my face and that smell. And that was probably the worst possible feedback, the way of giving feedback that I could have gotten, because I didn't remember any of it.
Yeah.
Fast forward to now, to today, could you imagine somebody, you walking into somebody's office and screaming at them because they didn't do something, whether you had a chew in your mouth or not?
No, you don't.
It doesn't happen.
Right. And
that's not.
But you can have the coach who came up to you, got in your face mask, screamed at you, but gave you the instruction you needed to do it better, and you understood it and you moved on, and you were better for it.
Yeah.
And in today's world, obviously you don't want to go into somebody's office and scream at them, but if you have someone there who has had that experience, they're probably going to be okay when you calmly explain a criticism. And I guess that's kind of the point. It's a little bit of a trial by fire, is like you get some extreme examples of feedback.
Yeah.
And then as you go out to be an adult, the world is kind of a little, it's moving slower, right?
Yeah, so in my digital signature on my email, I have a saying, and it says, a moment of praise in a time of need is worth more than an hour. A moment of now I forgot.
Oh,
I'm
man.
sorry.
Okay.
I'm on the spot now, basically. I got to come up with it. I apologize. A moment of praise in an hour of need is worth. Basically, it's just the right feedback in a moment of need is worth more than any praise.
Okay.
You know, that you could give somebody, because at that moment when you need, you may have done something wrong. You know, you may have designed something incorrect, or you may have, whatever it is, and somebody figured that out. You know, coming in to tell somebody, hey, yeah, something happened. We, acknowledge it, give the feedback you need. That's more than somebody coming in. That's worth way more than somebody coming in and giving you praise for something else. I mean, you're going to remember that moment that you needed it the most.
Yeah, not to say that it's bad to give praise.
Right.
You need to do that. But
Yes.
the way we receive that
Yeah.
is kind of status quo. Thank you. I feel good about
Exactly.
myself. I already felt pretty good about myself, but thank
Yeah.
you. Right? And that little bit of feedback does, if you take it right and it's constructive, it can actually help you get better. Whereas that
Absolutely.
positivity is good,
Yeah.
but it maybe won't change a whole lot.
Yeah.
It's good to acknowledge it. But yeah, a little bit of constructive criticism could change you for the better.
Yeah,
and you'll do even
exactly.
better. Okay.
Sorry,
Well,
that was a little clunky.
no, that's good. Okay, well, I just wanted to sit down for a conversation. I mean, a little bit about analyzers, a little bit about rodeo, a little bit about football. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good. Well, thanks for joining us, Andy. I appreciate
you.
it, sir.